I think Trump has had it, and I think that this minerals deal was the result of his exasperation.
Diane, we don't have a ton of time left, but I'm desperate to get your reflections on everything's been going on in Ukraine, starting with the mineral deal being signed. And it's very, very different deal to the one that we were discussing when we last spoke. Much fairer, much more about sort of wealth for both the Ukrainians and the Americans going forwards, rather than a reparation for military aid in the past. What's changed in terms of politics?
Well, I think that this is the Trump technique. You start asking for the earth and you bargain yourself downward, but you over ask initially, and people under offer initially, and you get to something in the middle, hopefully. This is exactly the process that happened, wherein Ukraine initiated the idea, and it was a brilliant idea to get the United States engaged economically, as well as politically with the future of Ukraine, and to also, in the same hand, help Ukraine develop itself post-war, rebuild itself post-war, and rid itself of its own, oligarchic corruption, which owns much of these assets. So it was a very good idea. They sent a version. The Americans pushed back aggressively, changing it, and back and forth it's gone. And this is, as I say, this is like business negotiations 101. It's not about diplomacy. It's not about side deals. This is about money and so on. Now, there's a couple of wonderful benefits that have arisen from this. Not only does this obviously state clearly to Mr. Putin, hands off the rest of it. We're going to be there. So that's good. That means that a truce is potential, not necessarily possible, but potential. The other thing is that in the language of the deal was a reference to helping rebuild the country's enormous damages as a result of the Russian invasion. And so that states something very bluntly that Trump has always tiptoed around to try and curry favor with Putin to get him to the table. So I think on balance, it's the best that could have been hoped for.
And what you described in the first part of your answer is tantamount to a security guarantee. I think you said, hands off Putin, we're here. Do you think that is how it is intended? Because that's been the big question about it from the very beginning. Where is this a security guarantee by another name?
Well, I mean, Zelensky would have loved American boots on the ground, but that's not going to happen. And neither is NATO boots going to be on the ground. This deal does not preclude European peacekeepers. This deal also does not preclude Ukraine joining the European Union. And it's already on the to-do list, and they go on Europe's part. Those represent enormous security guarantees too.
So what does it mean for Putin?
Doesn't mean he's lost, but it doesn't mean he can win.
Yeah, I think that's a very succinct analysis. I mean, I think that it will expose quite quickly to Trump and to the team around Trump that Putin has been playing them, and that he has no intention of signing up to any sort of deal. Do you think that the U.S. administration, when they realize that, will accelerate the armament of Ukraine in order to seek to force Putin to the negotiating table, or if not, what happens next? Because the minerals deal is in place, but in theory the conflict is still live.
Well, immediately after the details were released, the Trump government asked for allocation for $50 million worth of weaponry to be sent to Ukraine, which is a little tiny beginning, but obviously an indication that they want to help them defend themselves against any incursions. And of course, now the next job is to get them to the table. And the other issue is, what is Trump going to do when Putin continues to play his little games. Let's have a peace deal, 30-day truce. I've declared a truce, and then bomb civilians. I mean, it's just got to stop. And I think Trump has had it. And I think that this minerals deal was the result of his exasperation, uh, and the abandonment of any idea that he can butter up Putin to behave.
Who
I
do we who are the sort of voices that those of us that don't follow American politics so closely, who are the people that traditionally have been um, the most strident apologists for Putin, and who should we look out for changing their tune to indicate that actually America's position might be about to fundamentally change?
Well, the most the Putin sympathizers are guys like uh, Carlson in the U.S.,
Yeah,
the podcaster,
yeah.
and the MAGA guys, and then you've got some members of the right-wing European parties who come pretty close to being Kremlin fans. And so those are the people that have been pushing this narrative. The other thing, though, however, is that he can never be let off the hook, Mr. Putin, for stealing children. Tens of thousands of children have been kidnapped from Ukraine during this war, and we don't know where they are, and they've been put in orphanages and up for adoption. This deal is completely silent on that, but the International Criminal Court has not been silent, and we must make sure that Mr. Putin is reviled and dogged and isolated and prevented from traveling to as many countries as possible until this is resolved.
I'm certain that that will be the case. Certainly from countries in Europe, and you would imagine that the Aussies, the Japanese, the Canadians will be very similar in their mindset. I guess the question is the degree to which that sort of consensus amongst everybody else is undermined if the US isn't in exactly the same position. It sounds like you expect that that would be the case, that the US administration would not push for any sort of resolution on that front.
Well, I think they want to do this mineral deal, and they want a truce. They want them both at the table. They want to sort out an end to the shooting, and then I think that this will also be something that will be taken up by a lot of the human rights activists in the U.S. that are still very involved. And the Americans don't recognize the International Criminal Court because they wanted to protect some of their war criminals over the years. Following Iraq and Vietnam and goodness knows what. But the fact is that I think there will be a global movement to try and correct this horrible wrongdoing and to make Putin pay for it publicity wise or otherwise.
Just in the last 90 seconds or so that we've got, do you think that the US administration's attention span is sufficient for them to not just catalyze the peace, which, whether you agree with the method or not, we are in a position that 4 or 5 months ago would have felt quite unlikely, where the sort of outline of a peace deal is on the table and we just need to force Putin to sign. So in that sense, there's arguably success. But in winning the peace, what comes next over the next year or two, can you see Washington wanting to lead that, or will Washington seek to extract itself and focus on other things?
I think Washington would like to hand it all over to Europe completely. He really is distancing himself from NATO and so on. I mean, there's still members in that sort of thing, but I think the ball should be in Europe's court, as Europe is next if he isn't stopped. And Europe has the money, but it doesn't have the military, and it's got to get its act together. And I think diplomatically, they have to unite around this issue, and they have to help Ukraine rebuild and help, punish Putin in any way possible.
Yeah, Diane, look, it's great talking to you, and your insight is hugely appreciated. Please do come and talk to us again. Um, For now, please do make sure that you subscribe to the Times Radio YouTube channel, where you can see more episodes of Superpowers, but also all the other wonderful geopolitical content that Times Radio produces each week. For now, I'm James Heapy with my guest, Diane Francis. Thank you very much. See you next week.